British Army sergeant crawled through mud on his belly at 4:47 morning. September 1981. East German countryside. 200 meters from Soviet Army training ground. Temperature 8 degrees Celsius. Rain. Darkness. Sergeant Tony Haw, 34, Special Intelligence Unit, stopped crawling. Listened. Heard distant sounds of Soviet soldiers at firing range. Too far to worry. Probably. Beside him, Major Jim Orr whispered, "See anything?" Haw scanned area with night vision. Latrine pit, 30 meters northeast. Fresh? Can't tell from here. Need closer. They crawled forward, through mud, through puddles, toward Soviet field latrine, temporary pit toilet used during training exercises. Their mission: collect whatever Soviets discarded in that pit, specifically paper. Soviet soldiers, in field during exercises, used whatever paper available for toilet purposes, including classified documents, training manuals, maps, orders. They'd tear up documents, use them, throw in latrine pit. British intelligence wanted those documents. This was Operation Tamarisk, one of strangest, most productive intelligence operations of Cold War, and most disgusting. 1975. British Army of Rhine Headquarters, West Germany. Major Jim Orr sat in briefing receiving assignment that would define next decade. Intelligence officer, late 40s, stood at front. We've identified pattern. Soviet forces conducting training along East German border disposed documents improperly, specifically using classified materials as toilet paper. Someone laughed. Officer didn't smile. Not joke. We've recovered fragments from field latrines near border. Operational orders, unit designations, equipment lists, intelligence value significant. Orr raised hand. How exactly do we collect? Go to Soviet training areas after exercises conclude, locate field latrines, collect whatever paper they discarded, bring back for analysis. So, we're literally digging through Soviet shit for documents. Yes, Major, that's exactly what you're doing. Orr looked around. Nobody volunteering. I'll need team, not one-person operation. You'll have Sergeant Haw, experienced NCO, good fieldcraft, doesn't mind getting dirty. Understatement. October 1975, first mission. Orr and Haw approached Soviet training ground near Magdeburg at 3 Haas a.m. Soviet exercises concluded 6 hours earlier. Troops withdrawn. Area abandoned, but booby traps possible. Unexploded ordnance likely. East German border guards patrolled irregularly. Getting caught. International incident. Court-martial. Possible imprisonment. Maddest thing I've done in 20 years, Haw whispered. Agreed, let's finish. Found latrine pit easily. Smell gave it away. Shallow pit, meter deep, half filled with waste and paper. Or pulled plastic bags and tongs. Collect everything, don't analyze in field, bag it, intelligence sorts later. Everything. Everything. Haw knelt beside pit. Reached with tongs. Pulled soggy, filthy piece of paper. Placed in bag. Then another. 40 minutes. Approximately 50 pieces collected. All covered in human waste. All potentially containing classified Soviet intelligence. Got what we can reach. Deeper stuff decomposed. Good enough. Move. Crawled back toward West German border. 2 kilometers through darkness. Carrying bags of Soviet soldiers' used toilet paper. Analysis. British military intelligence spent 3 days cleaning and analyzing materials. Most worthless. Personal letters. Newspaper fragments. Actual toilet paper. But 5 pieces. Gold. Soviet training order showing exercise schedule next quarter. Unit designation for tank regiment near Berlin. Maintenance log showing equipment readiness. Map fragment with unit positions marked. Code sheet for tactical communications. 5 pieces. from latrine pit. Worth hundreds of hours traditional intelligence gathering. Operation Tamarisk approved for continuation. March 1977. New Strelitz, the jackpot. Orr and Haw approached Soviet training site at Neustrelitz. Routine collection. Expected standard documents. What they found changed everything. Latrine pit deeper than usual. Soviets had been there week. Multiple units rotating through. Lot of material, Haw observed. Take time, get it all. 2 hours collecting. Filled 6 bags, more than any previous mission. One piece caught Orr's attention. Thicker paper, multi-page document. Torn but intact enough to read. He pulled it out carefully, looked at it with flashlight. "Tony, look at this." Haw came over. "What is it?" "Order of battle booklet. Shows structure of entire Soviet force in East Germany." Silence. Order of battle. Complete listing of all units, their locations, their strengths, their equipment. Single, most valuable document Western intelligence could acquire about Soviet forces, and Soviets had used it as toilet paper. "How much is intact?" Haw asked. "Maybe 60%, enough to reconstruct rest." "Jesus Christ, this is biggest intelligence find since Berlin Wall went up. We need to get this back, now." They abandoned careful collection procedure, grabbed what they could, moved fast toward border, 2 kilometers, running when terrain allowed, crawling when necessary. Reached West German territory at 5:47 a.m., just before dawn. Handed materials to intelligence officers waiting at pickup point. "Priority analysis, tonight," Orr said. Within 48 hours, NATO commanders had complete picture of Soviet force structure in East Germany. Divisions, brigades, regiments, equipment, readiness levels, all from toilet paper. April 1977. The response. NATO used Tamarisk intelligence to completely revise war planning. Identified weaknesses in Soviet deployment, gaps in coverage. Units that were shell formations. Existed on paper, but under strength in reality. Changed entire defensive strategy for Central Europe. Soviet commanders never knew, never suspected Western intelligence had obtained their order of battle by collecting used toilet paper. September 1981. Close call, number 1, the soldier. Orr and Haw collecting materials when they heard sound. Footsteps, close, froze. 30 meters from pit, Soviet soldier. Walking toward them. Solo patrol? Lost soldier? Checking area? Didn't matter. If he saw them, operation compromised. International incident. Possible shooting. Or signaled, "Stay down, don't move." Soviet soldier approached pit. Stopped 5 meters away. Started unbuttoning pants. Coming to use latrine, right where they were hiding. Or calculated. Run? Soldier would see. Fight? Bigger problem. Stay hidden? Soldier might literally shit on them. No good choices. Soviet soldier stepped to edge, started urinating. Orr and Haw lay motionless 3 meters away, barely breathing. Praying soldier didn't look down. Soldier finished, buttoned up. Stood there looking around, pulled out cigarette, lit it, smoked while standing beside pit. 5 minutes felt like hours. Finally, soldier flicked cigarette into pit, walked away, or waited 15 minutes, making sure soldier wasn't returning. "That was too fucking close," Haw whispered. "Agreed, finishing out." Collected remaining materials, crawled back to border. Never spoke about how close they'd come. June 1983. Close call, number 2, KGB. Soviet counterintelligence had begun noticing patterns. Documents disappearing from training sites, not many, not obviously, but enough to raise questions. KGB increased surveillance around Soviet training areas, watching for Western intelligence operations. Orr and Haw didn't know this when they approached training ground near Wittstock. Standard mission, standard procedure, locate latrine, collect materials, return. But when they reached collection point, something felt wrong. "Vehicles," Haw whispered. "Hear that?" Distant engine sounds, multiple vehicles, moving toward them. Could be routine patrol. Or KGB sweep? They had two choices: abort mission and extract immediately, or continue collection and risk being caught. Or made decision: collect fast, 5 minutes, then out. They worked frantically, grabbing materials. No careful selection, just bag everything reachable. Engine sounds getting closer. "Time's up, move now." Started crawling toward border. Half-kilometer behind them. Headlights visible. Vehicles searching area systematically. Orr and Haw moved as fast as possible without being seen. Crawling. Running when terrain allowed. Hearts pounding. Vehicles behind them sweeping with searchlights. Systematic pattern, professional search. 200 meters from West German border. Searchlight swept past them. Missed by 10 meters. 100 meters. Voices behind them. Russian commands. Search teams on foot now. 50 meters. Searchlight found their trail. Shouts. Running footsteps. They crossed border at 4:23 a.m. Fell into West German territory. East German border guards stopped at line. Couldn't cross without starting international incident. Stood there shining lights, shouting, but couldn't pursue. Orr and Haw lay in mud on West German side. Safe. Barely. "KGB's onto us," Haw said. "Maybe, or just bad luck." Either way, operations just got more dangerous. 1983, 1989, heightened risk. After June 1983 incident, Tamarisk operations became more careful, more surveillance, more planning. Longer intervals between missions, but continued. Intelligence value too high to stop. They developed new techniques. Better surveillance of Soviet movements, better timing, better escape routes. Collected hundreds more documents over 6 years. Chemical warfare manuals, communications schedules, equipment specifications, unit movements, all from toilet paper. 1989. Berlin Wall falls. Soviet forces began withdrawing from East Germany. Training exercises stopped. Field latrines no longer used. Tamarisk's operational environment disappeared. Orr and Haw conducted final mission October 1989. One last Soviet training site, one last latrine pit, one last collection. Brought back handful of documents, nothing spectacular, training notes, personal letters. "End of era," Orr said. "Good riddance. 20 years crawling through Soviet shit. Never thought I'd be grateful for Cold War ending." Final report submitted. Operation formally concluded 1995 after 5 years inactive. Total missions, approximately 200. Total documents recovered, thousands. Total intelligence value, incalculable. Total dignity maintained, 0. 2010, declassification. British Ministry of Defense declassified portions of Tamarisk in 2010. Orr and Haw, both retired, were interviewed by military historians. "People ask if it was worth it," Orr said. "Crawling through mud at 4 a.m., digging through human waste, risking international incident. And I tell them, absolutely. Intelligence we collected informed NATO strategy for 2 decades. Order of battle, find alone changed war planning, potentially prevented miscalculations that could have led to conflict. So, yes, worth it. But I'm glad I never have to do it again." Haw laughed. "I burned every piece of clothing from those missions. Couldn't get smell out, even after washing. Some experiences you don't forget. Or want to remember. The recognition." Orr and Haw received military commendations. Classified initially. Public after declassification. Citations mentioned extraordinary dedication to intelligence gathering in hostile environment. and significant contributions to NATO defensive capabilities. Didn't mention shit, used diplomatic language for undiplomatic operation, but people who knew, knew. 2 men crawled through Soviet waste for 20 years and brought back intelligence that shaped Cold War. That was legacy. Not glamorous, not clean, but effective. Soviet perspective. After Cold War ended, former Soviet officers learned about Tamarisk. Initial reaction: disbelief. Nobody thought Western intelligence would dig through latrines. Then embarrassment. They'd been careless. Used classified materials for toilet paper. Then grudging respect. British had identified vulnerability. Exploited systematically. 20 years. Former Soviet general, 2012 interview. We knew Westerners had good intelligence, assumed spies, assumed electronic intercepts. Never imagined they were collecting our toilet paper. Clever, disgusting, but clever. And it continues today. Different conflicts, different methods. But principle remains. Intelligence comes from everywhere. Even places nobody wants to look. You just need someone willing to get dirty. Major Jim Orr sat in British intelligence analysis room staring at photograph that shouldn't exist. March 1977. Week after order of battle recovery from Neustrelitz latrine pit. Photo showed reconstructed Soviet document. Cleaned, dried, pieced together like jigsaw puzzle from fragments covered in human waste. Complete listing of Soviet forces in East Germany. Every division, every brigade, every regiment, their locations, their equipment, their readiness levels. Single, most valuable piece of tactical intelligence NATO had acquired in 20 years, and Soviets had used it as toilet paper. Intelligence officer beside him spoke. NATO commanders want to know, can we trust this? Could it be disinformation, planted deliberately? Or almost laughed. Disinformation campaign that requires Soviet soldiers to shit on classified documents and leave them in field latrines, hoping British intelligence digs through waste to find them. That's the most elaborate deception plan in history. Fair point. This is real. Soviets got careless. We got lucky. And now we have their complete force structure. Officer nodded. Then we use it. War planning, defensive positions. Everything changes based on this intelligence. Good, because Sergeant Haw and I crawled through a lot of shit to get it. The transformation of NATO strategy. Over next 6 months, NATO completely revised war plans for Central Europe using Tamarisk intelligence. Identified that 3 Soviet divisions listed at full strength were actually shell formations, existing on paper but only 40% manned in reality. Discovered Soviet ammunition depots were concentrated in specific areas, making them vulnerable to precision strikes. Found gaps in Soviet defensive coverage that NATO forces could exploit. Changed positioning of NATO units to counter actual Soviet deployment rather than assumed deployment. Military analysts estimated Tamarisk intelligence improved NATO's defensive capabilities by approximately 30%. In war scenario, that difference could determine victory or defeat. All because Soviets used classified documents as toilet paper. July 1982. Chemical warfare discovery. Haw extracted document from latrine pit near Magdeburg that initially looked unremarkable. Training manual. Standard Soviet military publication. Dozens collected over years. But this one was different. Chemical warfare protection protocols, showing exactly how Soviet forces defended against nerve agents, what equipment they used, what procedures they followed, what weaknesses existed in their protective systems. NATO chemical warfare specialists studied document for weeks. This changes everything, senior analyst explained. We've been assuming Soviet chemical protection was more sophisticated than it actually is. This shows vulnerabilities. shows they're using outdated equipment, shows their doctrine has gaps. How valuable is this? Orr asked. If chemical weapons were ever used in European conflict, this document could save thousands of NATO lives. It shows us exactly how to exploit Soviet weaknesses in chemical defense. From toilet paper to life-saving intelligence. September 1985, the close call that ended careers. Two young British lieutenants, Not Orr and Haw, were assigned to Tamarisk mission near Potsdam. Standard operation, collect materials, return. But lieutenants were inexperienced, rushed, careless. They didn't properly surveil area before approaching latrine pit. Didn't notice East German border guard patrol nearby. Guards spotted them, challenged them. Lieutenants panicked, ran toward West German border. Guards pursued, shots fired. One lieutenant took bullet in leg. Other dragged him across border. Both survived. But operation was compromised. East Germans knew Western intelligence was conducting collection operations at Soviet training sites. Soviet forces immediately changed procedures, started burning documents after use, posted guards at training sites even after exercises concluded, increased patrols. Tamarisk operations became 10 times more dangerous overnight. British command court-martialed both lieutenants, removed them from intelligence work, made example to ensure nobody else got careless. Orr and Haw continued operations, but with heightened caution. Every mission now assumed hostile surveillance. 1985-1989, the dangerous years. After Potsdam incident, Tamarisk became game of cat and mouse. Soviets knew someone was collecting documents, didn't know who, didn't know how, but they knew. KGB increased counterintelligence operations, watching training sites, setting traps, waiting for Western agents. Orr and Haw adapted. Longer surveillance before approaching collection sites. More complex routes. Better escape planning. Sometimes abort missions if anything felt wrong. They still collected valuable intelligence. Communication schedules. Equipment specifications. Unit movements. But every mission carried risk of capture, imprisonment, or death. March 1987. The ambush that wasn't. Orr and Haw approached collection site near Wittenberg at 4 a.m. Everything seemed normal. Soviet exercises concluded previous day. Area quiet, standard procedure. They reached latrine pit, began collection. Then Haw noticed something. Fresh boot prints. Too fresh, not from Soviet soldiers who left day earlier. "Jim, look." Orr saw them. "Surveillance team, waiting for us." "Where?" "Don't know, but they're here." They had seconds to decide. Continue and risk ambush. Abort and lose intelligence. Orr made call. "Abort, move now, different route." They crawled away from pit. Not toward usual exit route, different direction. Through rough terrain. Behind them, voices. Russian commands. Search team emerging from concealment. But Orr and Haw had moved 30 seconds earlier. Enough to avoid direct contact. They extracted through secondary route. Reached West German border at 5:47 a.m. Safe. Later learned KGB had indeed set ambush at that location. Waiting for Western intelligence operatives they knew were conducting collection operations. Orr's instincts and Haw's observation had saved them. October 1988. The final major find. Soviet ammunition depot map, showing exact locations of every classified ammunition storage site in East Germany, found in latrine pit near Neubrandenburg. Torn, soiled, but readable. NATO immediately used it to update targeting plans. If war came, these depots would be priority strikes. But war never came. November 1989. The wall falls. Berlin Wall came down November 9, 1989. Within weeks, Soviet forces began withdrawal preparations. Training exercises stopped. Field latrines discontinued. Tamarisk's operational environment evaporated. Orr and Haw conducted final mission October 1989, more symbolic than productive, collecting handful of documents from final Soviet training exercise. 20 years, Haw said. 200 missions, thousands of documents, and it ends like this, not with bang, just ends. Better than getting shot in ambush. Fair point. They submitted final report December 1989. Operation formally continued on paper until 1995, but no actual missions conducted after November 1989. 1995. Retirement and reflection. Orr retired 1995 after 40 years military service, 20 of those years dedicated to Tamarisk. Haw retired 1997. 22 years, they'd risked their lives approximately 200 times, crawled through mud and human waste, nearly been captured multiple times, lived with constant stress of potential international incident. What did they have to show for it? Classified commendations nobody outside intelligence community would ever see. Pensions, same as any other military officers, their rank and time in service. Knowledge that intelligence they collected had fundamentally shaped NATO strategy for 2 decades, and memories they couldn't fully share with anyone who hadn't been there. 2010. Declassification and recognition. British MOD declassified Tamarisk, 2010, 15 years after final mission. Orr and Haw were invited to speak at Military Intelligence Conference. First time publicly discussing operation. Audience, intelligence officers, military historians, defense analysts. Orr explained methodology. We identified that Soviet field discipline was poor. They used whatever paper was available for sanitation purposes, including classified documents. We simply collected what they discarded. Sounds simple when you say it that way, someone commented. Simple in concept, terrifying in execution. Every mission carried risk of capture or death. We operated in hostile territory without backup. If caught, we'd have faced imprisonment or execution. No diplomatic immunity, no prisoner exchanges, just us and whatever happened. Haw added, and the smell. Nobody talks about the smell. 20 years later, I still remember it. Sometimes wake up at night smelling Soviet shit, PTSD from olfactory trauma. Audience laughed, but Haw wasn't entirely joking. The human cost. 2 decades of crawling through filth left marks, or developed chronic back problems from thousands of hours crawling. Required surgery 2003. Haw dealt with recurring nightmares. Not about danger, about smell, about degradation, about spending prime years of career digging through human waste. Both dealt with question. Was it worth it? Intelligence collected was valuable. Potentially prevented war, saved lives. But personal cost was real, physical, psychological. Marriages strained by constant stress and inability to explain what they did. Haw divorced 1991. Wife never understood why he'd come home filthy and refused to talk about work. Orr's marriage survived, but barely. Would I do it again? Orr reflected 2015 interview. Probably. Intelligence value justified risk, but I'm glad young officers today don't have to. Modern technology provides information we had to get by crawling through shit. Progress. 2024. Legacy. Operation Tamarisk remains case study in unconventional intelligence gathering. Intelligence agencies worldwide still teach it. Example of identifying enemy weakness and exploiting systematically. Also, example of human cost. Of asking ordinary soldiers to do extraordinary, degrading work for years. Orr died 2018, age 91. Obituary mentioned distinguished military career. Intelligence work, contributions to NATO. Didn't mention shit, didn't mention toilet paper, used diplomatic language. But people who knew, knew. Haw, still alive. 94, lives quietly in Devon. Occasionally gives interviews to military historians. Always and same way. Worth it? Ask Soviet forces who withdrew from Germany without firing shot. Ask NATO commanders who had intelligence nobody thought possible. Ask families who didn't lose loved ones in war that never happened. Then ask if crawling through shit for 20 years was worth preventing that. Answer usually yes. The method continues. Tamarisk's specific methodology ended 1989, but principle continues. Intelligence comes from unexpected sources, trash, discarded materials, things enemies don't think anyone will collect. 2003. U.S. forces in Iraq collected valuable intelligence from Iraqi military trash. 2014. Ukrainian forces collected Russian military documents from battlefield latrines. 2023. Western intelligence reportedly collecting materials from Wagner Group disposal sites. Different wars, different enemies. Same principle. People get careless with classified materials when they think nobody's watching. Someone's always watching. Someone's always willing to dig through trash, or worse, to find intelligence. That's Tamarisk's real legacy, not heroic, not clean, but effective. And in intelligence work, effective matters more than dignified. Just ask two men who spent 20 years crawling through Soviet shit and helped win Cold War without firing shot. That's a story, disgusting, absurd, true, and worth remembering.